Hello, welcome to yet another episode of Dav Chat. Thanks for joining in. Hope you're well and surviving all of the frenzy of the latest developments in the United States and the emotional roller coaster of coping with the president saying that he won't support a peaceful transition of power and that you have to get rid of the ballots and that there's not going to be a transition, there's going to be a continuation of power. Hi, Alan. Nice to see you. And of course, that great footage we have today of Trump making an appearance at the Supreme Court steps as Ruth Bader Ginsburg lies in state. Not only the first woman, but apparently the first Jewish American to do so as well, to be honored in that way. And the crowd erupted in boos, first of all, and then some bright spark thought of chanting "Vote him out," which was broadly taken up by the crowd. And you couldn't see Trump's face because, his entire face, because it was clad in a mask. Doing the right thing for once. Proto-despot dude, thanks. But one would presume his mouth probably looked similar to it did when he was booed at that baseball game before the coronavirus. So maybe 8 months ago when his lower lip almost seemed to quiver and he seemed to almost cry at being booed at a baseball game so resoundingly by the fans in attendance. So that's nice. That's nice because he should have to confront the depths of public rejection of his autocratic tenure. Now, I was reading an article in the Bulwark today, which dealt with an article from 30 years ago in 1990. In which Trump was being asked about the developments in China and the Tiananmen Square crackdown. And he sort of said something to the effect that he thought it was good. So what I might do is play some footage for you while I look that article up so I can directly quote it to you. Well, first of all, why not look at this graph? It's had 7 million views, and it's a dynamic representation of cases and days since outbreak for different diseases. And you can see how, using a linear scale, these different diseases rise in dominance over a period of time. But it does give an indication of something, and we'll discuss what that is at the end of this 39-second clip. So there's coronavirus overtaking SARS. Maybe I'll make it a little bit bigger for you. % deaths, but case numbers just so eclipse the numbers of cases for SARS. Start it again from the beginning. So there you see SARS, relative high case numbers. Ebola has lower case numbers because it doesn't spread as easily, just because it kills the people it infects so rapidly. Coronavirus, like a sports game making a late entrance there, coming up the charts. And it's a logarithmic scale now. And there it goes, still around 2% deaths. So there you go. So that's always worthwhile having a look at to try and respect it's not infection fatality rate, there's a different term for it, and I'll come back to that. But yes, the number of people it infects is substantially larger than that of other diseases because it's got some factors that work, that make this pandemic very problematic because you can be asymptomatic, because you can be very infective in a pre-symptomatic period where you can still be out mingling with people and you you're breathing out a lot of infective viral particles, but you don't know. And of course, it's a disease that's spread primarily via airborne mechanisms through breathing out respiratory particles that are decelerated by the presence of a physical barrier, particularly a non-woven physical barrier, such as a mask. And face shields, even though I used to point to early studies that said, look, physical barrier must be good, because it's such an airborne method of transmission, face shields don't cut it unless you're wearing them in conjunction with a mask. And I have been stressing that for a while, that yes, it's just to provide an extra layer of protection for your eyes, but maybe sealed goggles would be also better. And that's, again, if you're in a situation such as indoors, close proximity to people in an unavoidable setting, then that's when you'd want to have the dual protection of a mask and goggles. And not just protection for yourself, but goggles only protect you, but the mask protects you and also prevents you from being an efficient vector of transmission. Hey folks, nice to see you. Please turn music down. Oh, there was music. I'm so sorry. I had the music entirely turned down on my microphone, so I didn't hear it. And I played it so much, that must have been such an assault on your ears. I'm so sorry. All right. Now, the next thing I would like to show you is an article which has an interview with Trump from 30 years ago. It'll illustrate that it's not, some of his methods of thinking are not new. So here we go. It's written by someone called Jonathan Last, The Strong Man Cometh. March 1990, he sits for an interview with Playboy, hints at his future political ambitions, is asked about the Soviet Union and the Tiananmen Square massacre. So Playboy journalist, asked Trump, what were your impressions of the Soviet Union? And he says, I was very unimpressed. Their system is a disaster. What you will see there soon is a revolution. All the signs are all there with the demonstrations and picketing. Russia is out of control and the leadership knows it. That's my problem with Gorbachev, not a firm enough hand. Playboy journalist, you mean firm hand as in China? And Trump says, when the students poured into Tiananmen Square, the Chinese government almost blew it. Then they were vicious, they were horrible, but they put it down with strength. That shows you the power of strength. So let's just stop there and have a little think about what he's saying there, because he said they almost blew it. Then they did the vicious, horrible things, but they put it down with strength. That shows you the power of strength. So, yes, the dude has some views towards public dissent and the necessity and the desirability of viciously, murderously repressing that dissent. Playboy journalist says, why is Gorbachev not firm enough? Doesn't say, what is wrong with you, dude? But Trump says, I predict he will be overthrown because he has shown extraordinary weakness. Suddenly, for the first time ever, there are coal miner strikes and brush fires everywhere, all of which will ultimately lead to a violent revolution. Yet Gorbachev is getting credit for being a wonderful leader, and we should continue giving him credit because he's destroying the Soviet Union. But his giving an inch is going to end up costing him and all his friends what they most cherish, their jobs. So how does that strike you as reflecting on your current situation? Yes, he has already used force and he has had an authoritarian mindset for a long time. Absolutely. So I'm going to skip over a little bit what he says about Kim Jong-un. No, actually I won't. Trump on June 12th, 2018, to Van Susteren. Is that a Fox News personality, Greta Van Susteren? Maybe. So she asks Trump, what surprised you about Kim Jong-un? Trump says, really, he's got a great personality. He's a funny guy. He's very smart. He's a great negotiator. He sounds like he's trying to talk about what he thinks of himself. Who's ever suggested that Kim Jong-un is a great negotiator? This is ridiculous. He loves his people. Not that I'm surprised by that, but he loves his people. Van Susteren, what do you think he thought of you after he left? Wow, she knows what questions to ask Trump. Tell me about you, Trump. What do you think he thinks of you? Does he think you're a genius, like you undoubtedly are? Anyway, Trump says, I think he liked me and I like him. And I understand the past. And, nobody has to tell me. He's a rough guy. He has to be a rough guy, or he has been a rough person. But we got along very well. He's smart, loves his people. He loves his country. He wants a lot of good things, and that's why he's doing this. Great follow-up here by Greta Susteren, Van Susteren. She says, because this is Voice of America, it will be heard in North Korea by the citizens of the Democratic People's Republic of North Korea. What do you want to say directly to the citizens of North Korea? Trump says, well, I think you have somebody that has a great feeling for them. He wants to do right by them, and we got along really well. So we laugh. I just see little bits of people laughing at him because he talks about writing love letters to Kim Jong-un. But that was a really protracted extract for me of exactly how much he's praised the guy. And you know what? I guess I did already know that. He just loves Kim Jong-un. And it's indicative of a pattern where he loves people showing strength and is prepared to say that that strength means love. The way a parent who beats you is showing you that they love you. And now I haven't read Mary Trump's book, but I know many of you have. So you might be able to tell us some psychological pattern is being repeated in which an abusive, violent parent is equated with love and strength. Strength is love. Love is strength. So when you, starve millions of your people to death, and you have pregnant women have their bellies stomped on, and you feed you attach your uncle to a rocket and then fire the rocket. It's love. It's love. Very, very good rationale for not physically disciplining children if you think it might contribute to that kind of mindset where you mistakenly equate shows of strength with love and care. Greta used to be an economist for CNN. Okay. I can't vote out anybody other than the Australian Prime Minister. Hi, Mr. Ed. Nice to see you. But who do you want to vote out? That's the question. I think there really is a strong groundswell of opinion in the United States. All right. Oh, yes. One final remark from Trump about Kim Jong-un. He's the head of a country, and I mean, he's the strong head. Don't let anyone think anything different. He speaks, and his people sit up at attention. I want my people to do the same. So yes, Kim Jong-un will have you killed for dissent in North Korea. You get to listen to propaganda. You get your starvation rations. If you're really lucky, maybe you'll get to join one of the synchronized marching crew at rallies and get extra rations and get slightly plumper looking cheeks for television. And you'll sit up at attention every time Kim Jong-un is speaking. And that's what Donald Trump envisages as being just wonderful for American citizens. And bizarrely enough, the kind of people who really value authoritarian family structures where you have parents who punish all sassy talkback things and who insist on absolute obedience at all times, they're the kind of people who are like, yeah, Trump really conforms to my idea of a well-run moral universe and a well-run country. They cheer him on even as he talks about how strong Kim Jong-un is. So yes, The Atlantic has published a piece in which a Trump campaign legal advisor said they're going to try and talk to state legislatures to say, please appoint the electors rather than abiding by the results of the election, if there's any contention. Now, I've seen a lot of other people on Twitter say, well, that's ridiculous. State legislatures have nothing to do with electoral college electors. Alan's quoting Hamilton lyrics. Yes, it does give the Hamilton lyrics a great deal of resonance at this moment, doesn't it? Indeed. His power comes from the people. If we take it back, he cannot continue. Very much so. So I hope that was interesting. Let's go now to Twitter and watch Trump being booed and just enjoy that for a moment. Now make sure I have my volume on this time. Oh, and of course, nearly 500, I think it's 489 national security leaders, some recent and some former, have signed a letter of support for Joe Biden and repudiation of Donald Trump, which is good. Christopher Wray is testifying in front of the Senate, says he has not seen historically any kind of coordinated national voter fraud effort in a major election, whether it's by mail or otherwise, which is nice of him to just at least go on the record repudiating Trump's remarks in which he tries to fabricate voter fraud. We will come back soon and talk about the Moody's report that's just been released, highlighting that Biden's economic plan creates 18.6 million jobs in his first term, which would be 7.4 million jobs than Trump's plan. Because Trump, like most Republicans, just have plans to give tax cuts to their donors, friends, and economic peers, wealth peers. They don't really add to the economy, and that's why multiple Republican presidents, if you even look at that graph, I wish we could color in Republican presidents red. So Carter isn't that great. Reagan's better than Carter, but look at how much better Clinton is in terms of job creation relative to H.W. Bush and W. Bush. Extraordinary. Historically, this is a story from another dictatorship that fell. So the leader was addressing the people. This is important because it's inspiring. People began shouting, Cisco. I'll have to get somebody help me out with that pronunciation. Cisco. my history isn't good enough to be familiar with how to pronounce Nick. I know it's Nicholas. I'll just call him Nicholas. Nicholas, we are the people. And they chanted also, down with the killer. He put up his right hand in a gesture of irritation that incensed the crowd further. Elena urged him loudly, but off microphone, speak to them, offer them something. Nicholas looked panicked as he announced pension and family allowance increases of 2,000 lei, around $2 a month. Then he dried up completely. The catcalls grew louder. The director of TV made an executive decision and halted transmission. The picture went blank apart from a caption that read, live transmission. The burly personal bodyguard, General Moran Nego, bustled the leader from the balcony. Many have claimed credit as the first to jeer the dictator. For some years, it was thought to have been student Nika Leon, but his claims have since been doubted. One of the first barrackers was certainly a taxi driver, Adrian Donio, who said, we could see he was scared. At that moment, we realized our force, that we had strength. Now that's a beautiful thing to connect with, that when you see fear on the part of a dictator or would-be dictator or proto-dictator, you realize your own strength. So I thought it was important to share that with you. Here is the much promised hyped video. Have you seen it already, guys? It's the Trump getting booed. Oh, nope. Start from the beginning. How's the volume?
Watch it a second time then with louder volume. Because you need to hear them chant. Vote him out and see his reaction. So that was good. That was good. 36 seconds. We watched it twice. Now this one I will turn the volume down because this is also footage of a protest type of situation, but more violent. Riot police are there and they have masks over their faces to conceal their identity. So there's women here, a lot of women, and the security officers are afraid of having their names on a list that people make and appearing on a sanction list afterwards. So I'm turning the volume right down, and maybe turn your volume down too because the screaming is quite loud. But these are women who are purposefully screaming to intimidate the security officers who are trying to stop their protest. And the women rip off the masks. So that's in, oh, sorry, I didn't tell you where that was. That's Belarus. That's Belarus in Minsk, where Lukashenko illegitimately just, declared himself president, despite the fact that other people have pointed out the election was rigged. He went and asked Putin for advice on how to shut down the popular uprising. And it's hard. It's hard for Belarus because there's no superpower, large democracy defending superpower right now who will acknowledge dictatorial presidents like Putin or Lukashenko. So that's why you have women out there using their voices, calling it name and shame as a tactic of nonviolent resistance. It did seem a little violent that they would pulling the face masks off, but didn't physically harm them. That was just doing something that they were afraid of, revealing their identity to be on video, captured in photos, so that their fellow Belarusian citizens will see who is being employed to persecute protesters. All right. Now, Moody's, I'm not that familiar with, but check out their graph. This is very important. I always say it's very important for Dems to pay attention to economics, because the people who are attracted to voting for the Democratic Party are often people who, in terms of priorities and value system, might rate justice and equality up highly. So we might get exercised about representation, having a Black Democratic president. We might get motivated to complain about disproportionate violence in police interactions with Black Americans. But do we pay enough attention to talking about economics, or do we sometimes have a tendency to disdain it as money or profit? Money and profit is what occupies a slightly higher rung on at least the deference that Republican politicians pay to the concept with their speech. They talk more about the economy and they talk more about growth and helping businesses flourish. But the truth of the matter is that it's typically Democratic presidents that help the economy to flourish. And in any case, let's have a look at this graph, because maybe I should find out who Moody's is first. Moody's Analytics. Sounds like they're probably a pretty big company. Moody's
Analytics provides financial intelligence and risk reports. All right. Oh, wow. Even Moody's is now talking about traditionally Dem issues, because I just looked at their website, and prominently on their homepage it says, a note from Moody's CEO and leadership, our commitment to supporting equal justice. Moody's will commit $1 million over the next 5 years to promote equal justice and advancement of the Black community. 1 million over 5 years. Okay, something. And that's on their homepage. So that shows that there's a bit of a crossover. We can pay more attention to economics, and the economists can start paying more attention to issues that have often exercised democratic voters and democratic citizens. But more people, polls suggest, are paying attention to this now and recognizing that there is a problem, and that injustice stings, and that societies are not able to achieve their full potential when some of the citizenry are well aware that their tax dollars are going to pay the salaries of people who unjustly, disproportionately target them for harassment and brutality and even death. Yes, as an Australian, I can say Sanders is far left, because the policies that he articulates may be relatively centrist, but his affiliations and his admiration extend to the former Soviet Union, and he finds it difficult to disparage Fidel Castro, etc. And he also so values himself that he didn't effectively promote Hillary Clinton in the 2016 election, presumably because he cherished a hope that Trump's rule would be so terrible that that would really boost his support in 2020, which it didn't. People supported Bernie Sanders even less, because contrary to his expectations, which motivated him to do a very bad thing in 2016 and deceive people about the fact he knew from his campaign staffers that Russians were attacking Hillary Clinton to his supporters in a very targeted way on his Facebook page. Yes. So we women have a voice, and we will use it. Being lefty isn't bad, but being far left feeds into not only the irrational fears of right-wing or centrist Americans, but also the rational concerns of centrists who think that Sanders isn't a team player and that he doesn't respect the need of the economy to flourish in order to allow the maximum number of people to have jobs that feed their families and allow them to strive for a good quality of life for not only themselves, but their children and their descendants. Yes, you want healthcare just like Australians have, which we have and enjoy. And how many people are you prepared to die as a consequence of your insistence that you have healthcare delivered as you want it on the timetable that you demand it? And how much are you prepared to disparage other people who are working steadily to deliver Australian level healthcare to Americans? Because a lot of the far left are working to sabotage the 2020 election, all the whilst assuming this faux moral virtue that by not voting for Biden, they're helping Americans. By facilitating a dictator to stay in power, they'll increase the chances of a better electoral outcome in the future, because helping shore up the tenure of a murderous dictator who's killed probably at least 250,000 Americans, that's a great step forward for pursuing affordable healthcare. So yes, this is why I don't have any truck with people who have a little picture of Marx and say riding with Biden. So moderators, could we please mute that account, or I'll get distracted arguing with them, because it's an emotional weak point of mine that I find the betrayal of people who should be working to advance the democratic agenda of improved access to healthcare and improved economic stimulus and improved everything on every single measure of American well-being, and less murderousness and corruption, they won't help. They won't help. They'd rather sabotage. I have a bigger fall of tolerance than even I do to responding to maggots, because the betrayal feels more acute to me. That the left ideas, the far left's ideas, align with mine and my aspirations for America and Americans' aspirations for themselves and their own communities in the most part, because even people who vote for Republicans usually want better healthcare. They've just been deceived as to the cost of it, or they've been deceived as to the beneficiaries, or their racism has been so cultivated that they deride healthcare just because they'd rather prevent their taxes from helping Black Americans or Mexican migrants. So yes, mute that person if we can. Women definitely matter a lot in this election, but Biden's lead with white male working class voters has been eroded. You talked to a Trump person and he felt shock on his face when you said we have more in common than he thinks. Well, that was a great point to make then. Well done, Bob. You think he wanted to get booed because they'll spin it for propaganda. I hear you, but I don't agree. He's a strong man. He's part of his carefully cultivated mythology is that he's strong. He looked weak, turning away from people chanting, "Vote him out." It looks like he's rejecting democracy and the First Amendment. It's not violent protesters chanting boo or protesters saying vote him out. It sounds very democratic. It sounds very First Right Amendment, and it doesn't have a lot of the typical Fox footage that they love of burning and rioting. It's the opposite of that. So no, I'm not concerned about that footage being used against Democrats, because if they try it, I still think it indicates Trump's weakness and the breadth of respectable opposition to Trump. So they always try and characterize opposition to Trump as not respectable, as anarchists burning things, but all decent people love Trump. You just get a few fringe left people. People on the right have no idea. They're told that the polls are fake. Trump tells them that polls are fake, and there's all these quiet Americans who love Trump, and there's just these officious far left people who make normal decent people be quiet about how much they love Trump out of fear of being falsely accused of being racist, but that most people love Trump. They have no idea that the reality is that 60% of the American people, or 58%, are either fairly or very opposed to Donald Trump, and that it's 40 or 42% who stay with him, and even that is eroding, because it's not just Democrats that have lost their jobs or businesses. There are also multiple Republican families and multiple conservative-leaning independent families who have lost jobs, who have lost family members. It's very difficult for a president to win a second term to have a base that sustains sufficiently high levels of enthusiasm for broad turnout when you have such widespread suffering. Yeah, doesn't matter what they say. It's not particularly plausible in that sense to have to be critical of people chanting vote him out. Voting is fundamentally democratic. Alan sent me an article about 2,000 dead doesn't surprise people. Well, it gets normalized to a degree. That was a smart move, Bob. I think intuitively most people will try and contradict what they think Trumpists believe, but you reverted to straight out of the gate saying what you likely have in common. And that's very strong. That's a very strong position you took. Not intuitive, but excellent. And you didn't mention the election. That's good, because you have shown sophistication with your methodology there. When you mention the election and you mention opposition to Trump, what you're doing is you're psychologically activating all of their defense mechanisms. No, you guys always attack Trump and it's not fair. He's great. and you get that emotional response where they've projected their own personal qualities onto Trump. So if they're an honest, nice person and they're like, and maybe a bit forthright or occasionally say things, to their mind, Trump is everything that they are. No, he's honest. He's just a bit loose with his language. Like me, I'm not always perfect, like a politician always trying to be perfect. You circumvented activating or triggering that defense mechanisms. You worked around it by talking about what do we have in common and not even bringing up the election. So well done, Bob. Got him thinking. I commend you for your smart approach, and I'm glad you talked to me about it so that I could share that with everybody else. And I'll make reference to it multiple times going forwards because I think you've hit on something there. I can't remember now if I've told you guys that research has shown from anti-vaccination research of how to persuade anti-vaxxers that maybe vaccination isn't as terrible as they think. All of the straightforward methods that they tried didn't work. Giving them a pamphlet with information actually made them more convinced that they were right because of that activation of psychological defense mechanisms. You're challenging my facts? Well, I denounce your facts. Your facts are all wrong and you're the sheep and you're brainwashed. The only thing that did move the needle, as it were, on the fervor of anti-vaccination's commitment, anti-vaccination people's commitment to their position, was just giving them straight, unadorned pictures of children infected with the diseases that they were telling themselves didn't matter. So pictures of children suffering from severe cases of measles, or children with secondary encephalitis, brain swelling, secondary to measles. Pictures of children suffering with chickenpox. So when it was an abstract construct of just, oh yeah, measles is not so bad, vax people tell us it's bad, but it's not so bad. We'll have chickenpox parties, we'll have measles parties, to actually see pictures of children with their bodies covered with spots that are obviously painful and distressing to the children. That helped loosen some of their attachment to that position. Even if a vaccine does come soon, only 4 out of 10 Americans reportedly will consider taking it because there's a very strong, growing body of opposition to taking a vaccine if it's one that's endorsed by President Trump, because people believe on the balance of probabilities that he is pressuring or bribing people to circumvent normal safeguards and trials. So maybe over time, if Dr. Fauci says he thinks the protocols have been followed, if safety and efficacy trials, Dr. Fauci reassures people that safety and efficacy trials have been conducted appropriately, maybe that those numbers will change. But even trust in Dr. Fauci has eroded, and certainly Trump has, and the GOP Trumpists have shown the ability to corrupt people within organizations that have corrupted the output of those organizations. And I'm thinking of the CDC and the FDA. You quarantined when polio went through the town. So school was cancelled and you stayed home. All right, so I'm going to show you this graph. This is a chart from Moody's Analytics comparison of Biden versus Trump in relation to their proposed economic plans. Let's make this bigger. Yes, Trump has taken over the FDA. It's no longer makes decisions that you can rely are motivated or driven by science and scientists. There are Trump appointees who are changing things, changing CDC reports on mortality, death and mortality data. All right, GDP under different election scenarios. If you get a Democratic sweep, so that the Democrats get to push through stimulus packages through the Senate and as well as the House, then you have this real GDP is higher. If it's just a Democratic baseline, you have the blue dots there, slightly lower. Current policy there as well, which adheres fairly closely to the red line of what you'd get if you had a Republican sweep. And the anticipated GDP for that is in billions lower. So yes. And the dip, the original dip is remember 2008 and 9 after Bush's disastrous recession. Again, a product of Republican tendencies to have an economic policy that consists merely of giving wealthy people tax cuts and pretending that will so revitalize the economy, wealthy people having more money, that nothing else needs to be done because anything else is just big government interfering. And they compound people's fears of that by telling them it's communist, but also telling them it's going to give too much money to Black Americans or migrant Americans. All right. I'm just trying to find something for you here. Oh, I found it. Okay, you'll love this ad, you guys. Your town has a death rate of 12%. That's very high. Does your town have a higher than average age rate, or do you think it's just that a lot of cases haven't been detected? Because when you have the deaths as the numerator and the number of cases identified as the denominator, if the denominator is understated, then your percentage is higher. Oh, you have lots of seniors. There you go. I'm so sorry about that, Bob. Okay.
So what are they going to do with their money? We're going to find out who's better for the economy, ordinary people or billionaires. So here we have 5 people who all lost money because of cuts and austerity. We're going to give them that money back in the form of a pay rise, pension, disability support, a student grant, and a small business loan. And now we're going to go to our billionaire and give him £20,000 in the form of a tax cut. So what are they going to do with their money? Susan has used her money to pay for the family shopping. Tom gets some repairs done on his car. Everyone we gave money to is spending it in the local community. And the people who get that money go on to spend it too.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
All this money changing hands creates economic growth. Businesses take in more profits and they can hire more people. And they too go on to spend their wages. With every transaction, the government takes in more revenue. And they can use this to build new roads, hospitals and schools. And they can also hire more teachers, firefighters and police officers. Not only will these people spend the money that they earn, but they'll also make our country a better place to live in, attracting more investments and tourism.
Now let's see what the billionaire has done with his money.
Hi. So, how have you used the extra cash to stimulate the economy?
Pardon?
You know, the £20,000 tax cut we gave you. Have you hired any new staff or invested in local business?
Oh, that money. I completely forgot about it. In fact, I might still have it.
So, what are you going to do with it?
Send it to the Cayman Islands with the rest, I guess.
So you won't mind if we take that back then?
Security?
So as you can see, getting money into the hands of ordinary people does a lot more for the economy than giving tax cuts to billionaires. So if you agree, vote Labour on Thursday the 2nd of May. And let's rebuild Britain for the many and not just the few.
Okay, now the historicity of that ad, no matter how great I think it is that the Labour leader was widely perceived to be a communist, and he was trounced emphatically, leaving Britain under the care of a Conservative politician, Boris Johnson, who's left the UK with even higher death rates from the coronavirus than the US, if you'd believe that possible at this stage. So I'm glad you enjoyed that ad. What I might do is post on Twitter to members of Joe Biden's campaign team. I'll share that ad with them just in case they happen to look at it, just because I think it's so important to sell to the American public. Something that undoes the years of conservative brainwashing, where you've had a lot of smart, wealthy people who've gone to college because their families have been able to afford it, and they've been imbued with an economic philosophy that's less about an honest understanding of prosperity and how to generate it, and is more imbued with protection racket impulses for the very wealthy, which involves telling poor people that tax cuts deliver prosperity, tax cuts for the wealthy, rather than stimulus measures that give people money that spend it in their communities, causing local businesses to grow, generating economic activity. So if you see one of those posts that I post, please consider clicking like on it to enhance its visibility to Biden staffers, because I just think it's so important that we appreciate the role of economic clarity, making it really clear to people that, yes, giving tax cuts to wealthy people gives them money to, I'm going to pretend this is a check, to forget about. What are you going to do with that money? Send it to the Cayman Islands with the rest, I suppose. Security. Such a contrast. Very effective ad, I think. And even though UK Labour had unsurmountable obstacles that they did not overcome, that ad was done well, and would be great if it was replicated potentially by Americans who still see the Republicans as having this they consider that they're good economic managers, which is not true. And it's a product of false mythologizing of so-called Republican advantage economically. And everybody reports on it with a straight face in the US media. They'll say, oh, well, yes, people polled give Trump credit for the economy. And they never match that with, which is surprising given the extraordinary number of jobs lost under Trump's tenure. Or they never mention that even before COVID, that the rate of jobs created under Trump, or the number of jobs created under Trump, was lower than in the final 3 years of Obama's tenure. So yes, that ad would apply to the US as well. All right, now we'll go back to Twitter. So the GDP was at the top of this graph, and then jobs is below. Again, Moody's Analytics, this is a financial firm devoted to forecasting and analyzing in a financial sense, and they've looked at the economic proposals. Chart number 3 is non-farm employment in the millions, and more people will be employed. They're projecting close to 160 million people employed under a Democratic sweep, whereas closer to 150 million Americans employed in non-farm employment if there is a Republican sweep. So matching that type of data with that type of advertising, where you have an attractive young woman explaining things to people. It's been pointed out to me that a lot of Republicans will vote for an attractive woman, and that's how you have a candidate who won her primary despite being a QAnon supporter, who, what did she say about AOC? She said something handily. Anyway, it was quite an extraordinary language error to make for someone running for public office. And it wasn't a typo, it was she's misheard a common expression. But it shows that you've heard language rather than ever see it written. So it indicates someone who doesn't read very much, who just watches QAnon videos on the internet or shares Twitter threads, which she's done before, about the Protocols of Zion, which is something that contributed to the Holocaust, namely anti-Semitic propaganda that Jewish people were capturing and killing Christian children and drinking their blood. Something which you might realize is a type of conspiracy theory that underlies a lot of the QAnon stuff. If you dig deep into it, all of their accusations of there being international child trafficking rings, the people that they're pointing fingers at are predominantly Jewish people. So George Soros, and then they'll say Hollywood. And what they mean is Jewish people, because Hollywood is often associated with lots of Jewish movie producers and Jewish actors as well. All right, folks, how long have I been talking for? 51 minutes. Is that everything that I needed to cover today? Why is the Clinton Foundation trending? Let's just find out. Oh, because Trump tried to have it investigated. Yep. The bar-appointed Durham has tried to investigate her over the Clinton Foundation, which is extraordinary because it's the Trump organization, no, the Trump Foundation that has been disbanded, and Trump's children have been ordered to take classes on how to manage charities to not steal from charities in future, including veterans charities and children's cancer charities, because they diverted money donated by people in good faith that they would reach these charities. And instead, a portion of those donations went into the pockets of the Trump family business and therefore into the pockets of Trump and his children. So that's always fun when they try and do that. The good thing is there's been quite a few investigations of Hillary Clinton under Trump's unprincipled tenure in office, and they still, even these politically motivated investigations, haven't been able to find anything that they could plausibly charge Hillary Clinton for, even when they're very motivated to do that. Okay, this is a point being made about Trump and Biden, which is in the Moody's Analytics model. Biden does multiplier stuff that reaches working families, and Trump's economic plans do the opposite. So it's basically the technical version, he says, of who's really working for whom. Republicans, Trump, talk to the working class and appeal to them with a culture war of, you know, they're coming for you in the suburbs, and migrants will take the undocumented migrants will swarm your country in a caravan. All of that very emotional stuff that short circuits people's logical systems, particularly if they're undereducated, well, relatively less educated, and engages their limbic system of there's this threat to you. There's these brown people coming and they're going to jump over the walls, and they're coming in this caravan and they're bringing infection and crime, and they're rapists. Some, I suppose, are good people, as Trump said. If you don't know that migration has helped America flourish, and that most people, even in Texas now, I think it's a very high, unexpectedly high proportion of Texans who support immigration reform that creates a pathway to citizenship for all of the undocumented people embedded in their communities, which is great. I'm so glad that there's still a preponderance of people in Texas who've been able to accept that, even despite having a fascist in high office. So more from the Moody's report. The economic outlook is weakest under the scenario in which Trump and the Republicans sweep Congress and fully adopt their economic agenda. That's because they mostly cut taxes. never get to full employment, and unemployment would hit 5% in 2025 and just sit there in their analysis. So, yes. Hello? Oh, we're talking about carrying Trump. Eric's been ordered to testify on October the 7th. That is exciting. I heard that a judge had specified that he could not postpone his testimony until after the election as per his wish. Yes, Trump may have to be carried out of the White House. The good thing is to be hoped that enough officials stop sympathizing with the police and against the citizenry. And that's why I don't support using the defund the police slogan, because it does create a harshness in the minds of people who are employed in security positions to think the general public are hostile towards me. They don't want me to defend myself. Their sympathy is weighted in favor of criminals never being killed. They'll get to draw weapons and I won't be allowed to return fire because I don't have enough units of public support. And the public want to defund me. That makes them more likely to want to attack the public. Joe Biden doesn't support the defund the police slogan. He wants to redirect funding, or he says he wants to increase police funding because he wants to increase funding for cameras and other things that will bring additional accountability to the police force. But yes, aside from that problem of multiple investigations have highlighted a high degree of white supremacists and white supremacist gang members that have managed to join various security forces such as the police force and the armed forces. Can Eric Trump appeal this ruling in court? Yes. Well, then he'll probably try and tie that up till after the election as well. Body cameras needed in Kentucky. And yes, Mary Kay is suing the whole Trump family for defrauding her of millions of dollars. And of course, she has all those tapes from her aunt as well that might prove useful to her. They undervalued the Trump family assets in order to give her and her brother a smaller share of her grandfather's estate than she would have received if they hadn't massively lied. But massively lying to minimize expenditure and maximize what they get to keep for themselves is very much Trump's modus operandi, so not altogether surprising that his siblings would have played along with that. Apart from the good Trump, which was Mary Trump's father, who was tried to move away from the family business and became a pilot instead, and was shunned and belittled by his aggressive and demeaning and unsupportive father as a consequence. And Mary Trump, of course, blames them and that family, and particularly the grandfather, Fred Trump, for driving her father to alcoholism. And of course, then his early death from a heart attack secondary to alcoholism and liver failure. Oh, you're going to call her Mary Kay now? Is that what she said she'd prefer to be called? Yes, there's a lot of social services that are underfunded, and it would be nice to have perhaps paramedics who could support and respond to mental health crises instead of police officers, in light of that shooting of a 13 or 14-year-old autistic boy whose mother called 911, and then the police pumped him full of bullets. And I saw a little bit of the video footage of that. It was dark and they just ran towards him and shot him. And I think he said as he was lying on the ground, "Tell my mum I love her." And he's recuperating in hospital now, but he's 14 years old. He's autistic and he evidently left the house. So his mum was probably hoping they'd help persuade him to come home rather than roam the streets at nighttime in a fit of defiance or whatever it was. But instead he was just shot. And he's white, so it wasn't the casualness with which they treated his right to life, the contempt for his right to life that the police officers showed when they shot at him because it was dark. I think it shows that there's something happening as well as racism there, which is hypervigilance for their own security. To shoot at a 14-year-old boy when you don't even think he's armed because his mother has said, yeah, he's 14, he's not armed, he's just out of the house and he's having an episode, shows that they're hypervigilant for their own life. And I think it's under discussed that America does have a very high homicide rate in general, 5 times higher at a minimum than any other wealthy industrialized nation. So that police officers are trying to take matter into their own hands by preemptively shooting members of the public. Yes, there's a makeup manufacturer company. I wondered, oh, so what does that have to do with Mary Trump? Mary Kay, did they do something good? Yes, we know that Trump properties thrive off undocumented labor because multiple whistleblowers who were undocumented migrants from working in his golf courses and his hotels spoke out. Housekeepers, groundskeepers told journalists from the Washington Post that Trump employed them, that his staff members knew they were undocumented and that they didn't have driving licenses, and would send golf buggies to their homes to collect them, to drive them to work, knowing that they couldn't obtain a driving license because they didn't have enough paperwork for that. And then they were retaliated against by the Trump business. They got fired. Yes, best to not call police, but people do because sometimes they need help. So it's better actually when you have funding go to other institutions. Traveling teams of mental health professionals and paramedics who could help restrain somebody and return them home if they are having a problem. What has Tomi Lahren done to respond to Breonna Taylor's death? Not death, the travesty of one police officer receiving 3 indictments, wanton indifference, wanton endangerment for firing bullets only into the house of her white neighbor, because there were also bullets fired into the apartment of Breonna Taylor's black neighbor, but he only received charges relating to the white neighbor's apartment being shot at. And of course, no charges for any of the 3 officers who sprayed bullets at the apartment of Breonna Taylor after breaking into her house with a battering ram at 3 a.m. in the morning. 11 neighbors testified they didn't hear the police announce themselves. 1 neighbor did. So, of course, all the right-wing people on the internet are like, a neighbor said that they heard police announce themselves. What if you managed to sleep through that even? What if they did say police and you were asleep and you only woke up to the sound of your door being beaten down and you had a legally owned weapon and you sought to defend your castle according to some American law? I mean, I wouldn't want to do it. I'd rather have a baseball bat by my bed, because if you start a gunfight, people can get hurt. But the thing is, a white American can do it and not expect to have your entire house, every room in your house, be sprayed with bullets. Yes. So I can tell people are having some feelings about it because I can see this picture. Spotted Tomi Lahren and Kayleigh McEnany on my run this morning, and it's 2 garbage bins. 2 garbage bins. I never find making pronouncements about what people are based on what they say useful, because what the vacuous things that Tomi says doesn't necessarily mean that that's what Tomi thinks. It's what Tomi has found to be profitable. And it's very hard to dissuade people from saying things if they're profitable for them to say that. There's a cartoon that also says, the face when you see Tomi Lahren trending and you say, just don't look, just don't look. Oh, I think you might have shared that tip with me before. Put a sock on the end of the bat so you can get a second hit. The sock slides off. Okay, sounds good. When I was young, I read a story in which two young girls defeated a burglar by waiting in the darkness and then hitting him on the head with a heavy torchlight. Yes, they all gaslight. It's an industry of confected outrage that they use to cement their minority hold over the rest of you. And so we have to take a more uniform approach instead of just individually disparaging them and saying Tommy's vacuous and Coulter's so-and-so. We have to look at the bigger picture and say they are all deceitful and they're all being paid to deceive and paid to ramp up outrage. And maybe they say it so much that they're such practiced liars that they would even pass a lie detector test that they believe it. Probably Ann Coulter would. But Tomi Lahren used to advocate for reproductive choice. And now she's with the right wing, people who say, oh, well, how dare the left ask for anything because they're the ones who are murderers and they're the ones who discriminate against Black Americans because do you know how many abortions there are in the Black community? Do you know how many innocent Black babies are killed? That's the fault of Democrats. Which are lies. There's fewer abortions. The abortion rate falls under Democratic presidents because social safety nets are better and women are more likely to feel like they can support an additional child in their family with the medical needs and educational needs and emotional needs of another person. Whereas people suffering under Republican presidents where tax cuts for the wealthy, cuts to services for everybody else results in greater impoverishment and more women on the edge, more women who know that their partner might beat them some more if he's under more pressure to provide for more people, women who understand that they won't be able to pay the medical bills of their pre-existing children. Women and men who support anti-choice legislation are often people who lack the ability to empathetically relate to people in financial distress, what it must feel like to go, I care for my children so much and I care for my relationship with my partner, and when the lights are off and our children are asleep, we engage in pair bonding activities that are physically pleasurable and they've accidentally resulted in conception one time. But if we have another child at this point in our lives, then I can't buy medicine for so-and-so. And we don't have adequate access to healthcare, or I won't have enough money to buy lunch, and I won't have enough money to pay for a car, so I won't be able to get to a job and I'll lose my job. Our family can't function if we have another child at this point. Like, it shouldn't be told to me that I can't have sex with my partner anymore, because then you just deserve to get pregnant and you should proceed with the pregnancy regardless of your own feelings and wishes on the subject. I think a lot of people do understand that, and they understand that in the case of incest and rape as well, that women should not be compelled by the state to proceed with a pregnancy. Regardless of the respect you have for the sanctity of life, have some respect as well for what happens to families when you force them to grow a child until it is sentient, living in your human body, when you stop people from getting early access to abortions. No, I'm not going to talk about it in the terms that you're asking me to talk about it, because you're talking about it as if he is not going to leave. You're making an assertion there. And I would rather report it as Trump claims that he won't agree to a peaceful transition of power. He claims that he won't leave if he loses, because he says, well, it'll be cheating if I lose. Like, there's no way I could possibly validly lose. Let me keep talking some more about how mail-in ballots are somehow infested with fraud, which they're not, or pretend that mail-in ballots are somehow different to absentee ballots. And he'll go, absentee ballots are great. Mail-in ballots, totally different kettle of fish. Nobody should trust that. Thank you, John. Yes, their online personalities are designed to divide and conquer as well, so that we engage with them in a triggered fashion, in an emotional fashion, which short circuits our logical brain. If we engage with Tomi Lahren, and instead of looking at the bigger picture of people paid as part of a protection racket to weaken opposition to Republican politicians' building a critical mass of support amongst the kind of people that they can trick. We can't allow ourselves to just be so self-congratulatory that we say, well, everybody obviously agrees with us unless they're terrible. Lots of people are marinated in their social environment in Republican-friendly rhetoric that tricks them. It's not just partisanship. They don't just have different policy ideas. They have intellectual tricks that they perform. And yes, I agree with you that Trump is autocratic, but there are still some safeguards in the American system that I will assume have functionality. And I know that the Biden team are preparing a team of lawyers as well, knowing that Trump wants to challenge the validity of the election, which is likely to be a rout for Trump, really. Which there's two factors. There's, well, it shouldn't be surprising that Trump would be rejected and ousted by American voters because he's on tape as admitting to understanding the virus is deadly and airborne, 5 times more deadly than the flu. It's probably 10 times more deadly than the flu, but he at least told Bob Woodward he understood it was at least 5 times more deadly than the flu on February the 7th. So the economy's in the toilet as a consequence. His vaunted speedy economic recovery wouldn't resonate with women who've seen schools reopen and then close again because the virus hasn't gone away. So a lot of people are living, their lived experience is that it's been dangerous to push reopening without proper adherence to CDC recommendations. That for Trump to say, oh, I'm just so good at deals and I'm so good at ignoring health considerations, that I'll say, whatever, the economy is more important. The economy is important, but the economy is also a product of confidence and consumer confidence. And you know what is antithetical to high levels of consumer confidence? And a pandemic ravaging American states, particularly now American states that are governed by Trump-supporting Republican governors that have low adherence to CDC recommendations, that pretend that mask wearing is a civil liberties issue. Those are things that undermine the American economy, and those are the things that prolong the pandemic and perpetuate job losses and an ongoing weakening of consumer confidence. Oh, stock market. How's the stock market doing? Let's have a look. You ready to go to bed, darling? I think I am too.
No.
You're still doing work?
Yeah, having a little break, but also a big coffee. I could feel myself getting sick. I was just trying to.
Do you want some more chicken soup? Do you want to say hi? Do you want to say hi to the people?
Yep.
Just say a voice. Could you say hi? I'm Mr. Dovecat. Do it.
Mr. Devcat.
You are Mr. Dovecat. Hello. I'll show them my wedding photo. All right. Just so they know you exist. No, it's not possible for me to underestimate how terrible I think these people are. I think they're very terrible. Very terrible. The stock market. Okay. Let's look at the stock market. Now I'm curious that you've asked that. Can he sing? Yes, he can sing. He's not the best singer, but he can sing. I enjoy his singing voice. Tesla's down, Facebook's down. The Dow is up a little bit and volatility is at 26. All right. MarketWatch has an article out saying that they think, well, people predict all manner of things, but somebody thinks a second COVID wave is about to usher in another stock pullback. So we have a second wave coming. We have very wealthy people taking profits. I think the market is going to start to go down again. That's Yves Lamoureux. What a beautiful name, very French. He does need chicken soup. He's got a cough. Thanks, John. Yes, you too have a great day. Yeah, no, I don't think it's so much that he's shy, but he has a job. I am a trailing spouse, housewife person. So it is less consequential for me to have my face or my voice on the internet, propounding opinions that are not always endorsed by everyone and that are sometimes seen as controversial. I had a one comment on a YouTube post. Well, maybe I'll read it to you. It was extraordinarily judgmental. Comments. Maybe I deleted it. All right. Well, there was one commentator on YouTube who not only said your opinions are terrible, but who also tagged in YouTube support and said, and I would also like to call on the Australian government to shut you down, the Australian Department of International Interference or something. Like he was just making stuff up. I presume it's a man, which sounds sexist, but could have been a lady. But the very self-confident way in which he gave his opinion suggested to me masculine confidence. That still sounds sexist. I think that may be sexism, but that I've been cultivated to have as a feminist. But my version of feminism that I think is fairly workable is that we shouldn't have to deride men for being confident and sharing their opinions. We should just encourage women to share their opinions. We don't have to disparage men for that confidence or say, stop mansplaining. You can only call somebody mansplaining if they're so confident they ignore the fact that you've written a book. Like if they say, oh, well, you clearly haven't read the article and the truth is that you're a woman and you wrote the article, then you're allowed to say mansplaining because, yes, their sexist inability to conceive that you could possibly be an expertise on the subject on which you are dispensing opinions. That's sexism. It's like the sexist joke that lots of people fall for, that you say the boy went to the hospital and was operated on by his parent, but then his father rushed into the room. How could that be? And the joke punchline, and I totally don't remember this joke accurately, but the punchline is that how is this possible? It's because the surgeon is his mother, and people don't expect that because we're not just individuals. We exist in environments where some assumptions are broadly adopted. That society doesn't guarantee we have any particular opinions, but it increases the likelihood that we may collectively share some opinions, or that high numbers of us may share an opinion, that high numbers of us may forget to consider the possibility that a surgeon would be a woman. No, my husband's not a Trump supporter. No. No, but his job might not make it desirable for him to put his face and name on the internet, having strong political opinions either way. You can hear him coughing. I know, it's just started. Oh, you were joking. I am a good cook, actually. Yes. Thank you. They can hear you coughing, darling. They're sorry for you. Does that make you feel better? Yes. Yes, it's a bit sad, isn't it? If you have any cough remedies, I'm all out of honey. Oh, I could conceivably go boil him some coriander seeds, but it's not going to taste nice without honey. This was a good comment from someone who points out that for everyone who thinks that Democrats aren't doing enough to stop the GOP from rushing another SCOTUS confirmation through Congress, they don't control the chamber. They haven't for 6 years. And they don't because a lot of Democratic voters didn't show up in 2014, 2016, and 2018. So yes, it is tempting but inadvisable and kind of annoying actually to overblame Democrats. And I know I've been guilty of doing that. I spent a considerable amount of time in 2019 probably posting rude things saying that Nancy Pelosi should be proceeding with impeachment, that Democrats had won a House majority and that they needed to have some response to the utter corruption of the Trump administration and Trump particularly. Matzo balls are so good for sore throats and coughs, aren't they? This is something that says an economist is finding economic carnage in the wealthiest zip codes. Well, that might be something to talk about another time. How could there be economic carnage? Because inequality is getting worse. Yes, well, I guess in the wealthiest zip codes, it's probably more of a feudal system. You have some people who are very, very wealthy, and then perhaps they're getting away with employing effectively servants for a pittance. That could be what he's talking about. All right, let's watch some uplifting video before I go. Are you over watching that 11 Films Vote Blue 2020 video that I usually show at the end? If you're over it, just say I won't mind or signal you out for disdain. I'm happy as always to have had a chance to talk to you, see what's important in your world, see what news you're excited about, and see if you're still feeling calm and productive, because outrage can be addictive. We can get used to feeling outrage about things, and it can set up a very self-reinforcing neural circuitry in the brain of reward. We can get used to that outrage and expect that thrill almost of outraged again, rah! And it gives you moral clarity, and that can feel good. So hating Trump and hating the corruption and criminality can feel so good that we might get stuck in just condemning him and not engaged in a committed course of action to doing what needs to be done to actually end the activity that's causing the outrage. You know, if we're just too busy, if we're too dedicated to scrolling through Twitter and seeing what latest outrageous thing has been done, and we don't balance that out with time spent helping register new voters to vote, or doing what Bob does by talking to Trump neighbors about all the things we have in common. Most importantly, recruiting or registering, encouraging new voters to register to vote, and reminding our friends to check their registration because of unexpected GOP voter purges that have occurred. Hey, Ohio is apparently in reach of Democrats, and Quinnipiac should release their state polls in 40 minutes or so. I usually enjoy the Quinnipiac polls. They're not as, skewed conservatives as Rasmussen is or other people. Not calm but productive. That's fair. New analysis comes out saying Ohio, the Buckeye state, is indeed within reach for Democrats this year. That's really important because, I'll tell you why, Ohio results are reported early. So you want Ohio to strongly swing to Biden and be a blue state, because you need that early reporting of Democratic victory on the night of November the 3rd, just to reduce momentum behind Trump's plans to challenge the fair results of the election. And we know he's got those plans. He's very open about signaling it. he talks about, or his campaign officials talk to journalists about their plots to challenge the legitimacy of all of the mail-in votes, etc., which sounds very pernicious, but at the same time, consider also that they want to freak people out and they want to give an impression of strength, because that's his shtick of appealing to people who want a strong man. And in real terms, Trump is weak. The polls show his support is weakening. His handling of the coronavirus shows his incompetence or weakness. There, lots of things are saying weak, weak, weak. Of course, Trump's trying to plant stories in the media to say, fear my strength. Because by upsetting you and freaking you out by possibilities that aren't altogether logical, like state legislatures somehow being able to control what electoral college voters do, what the electors do. There's no constitutional pathway to do that, to my understanding. And people have said, oh, yes, well, we need to prepare, we need to be aware of his intentions, but also consider that his intentions aren't just what he says, but the likely context of those intentions is his intention to annoy, because that galvanizes his supporters who are addicted to feeling the win, feeling your loss, enjoying your emotional pain, and celebrating what they see as strength. Because what's important to them is not saving the lives of Americans, or even saving American jobs, or keeping America free of foreign interference. They are very heavily addicted to the emotional victory of winning, of just upsetting other people and shows of strength. They're like, good things will come of this because that makes him strong, and then he'll win in negotiations. We don't really have any proof that Trump will win in negotiations because he never does. All of his trade deals are bollocks. He's undermined relationships with allies. Farmers have lost billions upon billions of dollars, and Trump has had to reach heavily into taxpayer funds to give farmers $28 billion worth of funds to recompense them from all of the harm he's done to their trading arrangements with other countries. And that's just the start of it. He intends to give them more money. And farmers are evidently so, too many of them are so prepared to be unprincipled that they say, yeah, that's not socialism. We just, we deserve that 28 billion. Yeah, we'll vote against the socialists, but we should receive the social support from the taxpayers, because for some reason our trade deals and trade arrangements have dried up. Who can say why? We'll vote for Trump. He'll keep those socialists at bay and those communists. Trump doesn't use polls. He uses the tools of autocrats. He makes stuff up, and yes, but when he's at his most pathetic is when he's grasping on Twitter and he starts retweeting things. When he does his own lies, when he's more original with his lies, that's stronger, because they're often such big departures from the truth that people on the left and in the center left get very upset. And then the right celebrate their emotional win of upsetting you, which is their goal. They have no goals for the American people anymore. They're just addicted to proving that they did the right thing by electing Trump because of how great they feel whenever he upsets you. All right. I'm going to go. Thank you so much for being with me and being part of this thing. I've been talking for an hour and a half. I'll better go. Take care, everybody. Thanks, Michelle. Thanks, Alan. I hope you guys have a great day, and I will talk to you again soon. Michelle, John's gone. Army Mum wants to ask what my background is. I'm sorry I didn't answer your question earlier, Army Mum. You might have gone now. I'll take a photo of you saying I'm inspiring to listen to this. I can boast of your comment to my husband. That what I do matters. I think he understands that it gives me joy and it gives me pocket money, which is more than I can say for the other hobbies of some housewives. He knows that I consider myself to be participating in a movement to save civilization and to save America. And it's important to me and I care about America. I may have a tattoo, which I obtained after reading an American book called Chicken Soup for the Soul. And I won't tell you where it is or what it says, but just know that it's very American. It's very American. Not the American flag, though. Hello. You've joined me just as I'm leaving, but you can always flip through the replay if you want to watch what I've just said. Alan says no. What are you saying no to, Alan? One of my favorite accounts to follow on Twitter, I'll share this with you because it might be cheerful for you before I go, is an account called Contented Independent. And he often, you don't always have to agree with him, but he often puts forward views that are contrary to any people pulling their hair out. Only the quotes that people share on Twitter, but I should because I've seen, again, Twitter clips of him speaking and he's extraordinary. So yes, this is Contented Independent. His Twitter account handle is Contented Indie. He's Jewish and an independent conservative and never Trump. Supports Joe Biden for president. And he used to be, according to his own account, very right-wing. And he thinks, yep, he understands the right better because he was brainwashed or delusional in the same way that they are and has the same sort of perverted goals or that same arrangement of values that they have where they say, yes, we must avoid communism at all cost. And when the all cost turns out to be really high, they'll still have that commitment to nope, communists are lurking everywhere and you just have to, represent Joe Biden as a communist and say that he's a danger to the American people. And you might have seen that there was a woman in Time magazine who said that she was prepared to go into her car and turn the engine on and carbon monoxide herself and her 2 children to death if Joe Biden won the election. And that was an extraordinary position to take. But clearly some people are so brainwashed that they feel like that would be a rational step to take. So the degree to which there's a gap between what you think is rational and what is very, very irrational is a measurement of the extent of the crazy. So yes, this is the point from Contented Independent, which says, remember how all the pundits insisted that the Burisma BS was going to be a liability for Biden, and then it just comes out and there's nothing there, and it ends like a wet fart with no press taking it up. Tattoo. And what was the no about? Was a no, I don't want to know, because I'm not telling you anyway. No, I haven't listened to the Snapchat from NPR. Is it Snapchat or something else? NPR. Was it granddaughter? Granddaughter. Uncovering a grandfather's secret Nazi past. Well, now at least I've got it open on my tab, Bob. Thank you for your recommendation. How's Holly feeling today? Keep saying I'm going to go. I better actually go, hadn't I? So I've got that open. I'll go have a look. And again, take care. Thank you, John, for recommending James Baldwin to me. That's a good motivator. I will file that in my list of things that I should do sooner rather than later, because I think it really will enhance my understanding. As an Australian, when Obama came to power, I saw that there were demonstrations against the Affordable Care Act. I saw that there were people exercising their First Amendment rights, but with placards saying no, about healthcare, about more people getting access to healthcare, and I could not understand it in the slightest. I didn't know that much about the United States, but I was like, why would people be protesting against people getting healthcare? It seemed completely irrational and completely crazy to me. It still does, but now at least I understand the framework of the irrational framework that has been built that makes people angry that the Affordable Health Care Act was passed, because they've been built up to have these racist convictions that the poor in America consist mostly of Black people and migrants, and that taxpayer money, or that it being the pool of insurance people being forcibly broadened by the government is unfairly taking away your money and giving it to the undeserving poor. I understand now that there's a lot more stigma about being poor in the United States, and that stigma is often laden with racial discrimination overtones. You're old school regarding tattoos because it's against Judaism. Yes, I actually did not know that when I got a tattoo, because I'm from a fairly secular background. My my grandmother didn't end up in the camp. She jumped from a train when she was 16, and so avoided going to Belzec. But so she doesn't have one of those tattoos. So we never discussed that issue of how it's actually anathema to a lot of Jewish people to get markings on your body in that way. Holly is sore, but already up and about, which is great. Yes, it's something very potent that I think Bernie Sanders was able to tap into, the emotional healing for people to be told that it's not shameful to be poor. It's not shameful to have an income that is that does not allow you to live with dignity, that is actually a dysfunction, and that America's systems need tweaking so that wealthy industrialists don't get to set your wages to be so low that they can continue to derive profit from your labor, but that you can't feed your family or live with dignity. White privilege works best when benefits that are meant to be universal are enjoyed by a few. Interesting, yes. White privilege was a system that worked to generate prosperity during slavery and for a long time after that. Not only slave owners benefiting, but all of the adjacent white people benefiting from industries where there were cheaper products entering the system because there were no initial labor costs, because the people doing the labor were not paid for their labor because they were enslaved and abused. But America has a different engine of prosperity now, and it's called migrants, where you welcome, your country looks so inviting that people move there, and you have brain drain from other countries, but people move to educate themselves at your high quality educational facilities and then stay and make lives for themselves, or some of them stay and make lives for themselves in your country and marry Americans and contribute to the energy and economic momentum of the United States. But people with delusional white supremacy complexes have nostalgia for slavery, for that path to prosperity, for trading off the imposed enslavement or imposed oppression of others, be that on the basis of race, mostly race, but also of despising poor people, so that you think that's okay to have a feudal sort of arrangement of the landed gentry and then the people who have to work for a pittance, and you just say, well, they should have got an education like me. You're far more likely to succeed educationally if your family have books in their house, a lot of books in your house, regardless of the socioeconomic status of your family. So if you're poor but your parents really appreciate books and read to you and have books in your house, then you have more of a chance to overcome the obstacles to social mobility that otherwise exist if you read and are an autonomous learner. But for most people, families that haven't grown up with books, that's one way of the perpetuation of economic disadvantage, is that this looking down on people who aren't raised in a family that already knows how to spell and can share their educational advantages with family members. So Joe Biden was the first in his family to go to university. That makes him more relatable as a political candidate because he can say, yes, I'm not from that saturated, inherited system of high education. He was able to initiate higher learning by his own efforts, and then his family subsequently also have pursued higher educations. His son Beau, Attorney General, served in the military. Even his son Hunter, it's not talked about much, but he has a Yale education. His daughter Naomi Biden wrote this very moving thread. In fact, let's look it up. All right. Okay. Though the whole world knows his name, no one knows who he is, writes Naomi Biden. He's a thread on my dad, Hunter Biden, free of charge to the taxpayers and free of the corrosive influence of power at all cost politics. The truth of a man filled with love, integrity, and human struggles. There's Hunter Biden as a young man with his daughter, Naomi Biden. So handsome. Oh. Oops, this is not part of the thread. This is just also very good.
If you're liberal, stop scrolling. I have a question. Why are you voting for Biden?
He will expand Obamacare and ensure that 20 million people can keep their health insurance. He wrote one of the first climate bills in 1968 and will continue to fight against climate change by, for example, modernizing our infrastructure and our grid, which creates jobs at the same time. He created a Bernie Biden Unity Task Force, which shows he can listen to people with different viewpoints than him, which makes it easy for progressives to fight for better policies when he's in office. He acknowledges that he does not know everything and will listen to scientists when it comes to COVID or the wildfires on the West Coast. He wants to eliminate private dollars from elections and restrict super PACs. He will not appoint Ted Cruz to the Supreme Court. I am a Bernie supporter, a progressive, and a first-time voter in November, and I will be happily voting for Joe Biden.
All right, here's the thread again by Naomi Biden. It is a lovely picture. So cute. It's just loading. My dad has never sought the spotlight. Growing up, when I attended political events with my dad, my pop, people would ask if I was Beau's daughter or Beau's brother's daughter. He liked it that way. He found his purpose in doing everything in his power to help Beau achieve his dream. He and Beau were one heart, one soul, one mind. They grew up with the weight of knowing that each day they lived was a day that their sister, my namesake, and their mother lost. So if you remember when the brothers were little, their mother and their sister was killed in a car accident. But they had each other, and that would be enough. They would make sure it was enough. After graduating college, not certain what he could do well, but certain that he wanted to do good, he joined the Jesuit Volunteer Corps, a Catholic organization working on behalf of marginalized groups and devoted to community and social justice. This is where he would meet my mum. Mom. His dream was to attend Yale Law School, but he was rejected. He started his first year at Georgetown instead, he and my mum simultaneously preparing for the start of a family. I was born not just the day of, but in the middle of his civil procedure final exam. He left the exam and rushed to meet my mother in the hospital. A good family friend still likes to joke about picking him up to take him to the hospital, dressed in a suit too big for him, and still in the early days of a life of unknowable adventure. Later that year, he applied to Yale as a transfer student. He thought he had no chance, but my mum believed in him, and more importantly, them together. For his personal statement, he wrote a poem, something they strongly advise you against doing. Something they encourage you strongly against doing. He received a letter from Yale saying that the dedication and hard work he had devoted to his study of the law at Georgetown made him more than qualified, but that the poem, unlike anything else they had ever received, earned him a spot at Yale Law. The three of us moved to New Haven into a house that, although no bigger than my freshman year dorm room, was all we needed to call home. Every night they put me to sleep to our anthem. 3 is a magic number from Schoolhouse Rock. Supporting the three of us off nothing more than his student loans and the cash he saved working summers through high school and college, often with Bo, including at a meatpacking plant, long story, he graduated from law school, from Yale Law. He, the three of us, graduated from Yale Law. After graduation, he put his dreams on hold to take a job that would ensure that anything was possible for me and my sisters. He used that money to pay off not only his student loans, but his Uncle Bo's college and law school loans so that he could pursue his dreams too. When my uncle got sick, my dad never missed a single doctor's appointment or chemo treatment. When he got sicker, my dad lived out of a suitcase and slept in the chair next to his hospital bed for 2 months. He held his hand as he lost his brother and a big piece of himself too. The pain he has endured would be enough to make a lesser man give up on life altogether. But despite the best efforts of a cruel few to destroy a private man, he is sober, happy, and is at peace as ever today, because as long as his family needs him, he has not lost his purpose. So this thread is posted by Naomi Biden. She has an account under her own name in Twitter. Naomi Biden is the handle. And yes, she's Joe Biden's granddaughter. She's Hunter Biden's daughter. It is hard. And we'll go back and we'll look at the picture at the top again of that thread. So that was the end of her thread. That is the story of her father as she wanted to tell it. So she's, left out some of the things. He's obviously had, people know that he's had some addictions to drugs, that he was, I think, made to leave the Navy at one point, a veteran with a drug problem, not entirely unheard of. And people know that he was on the board of Burisma. But yes, he has a Yale law degree and he has worked for different corporations. So yes, you're not going to cry? No. Yes, so her dad is just the butt of a Donald Trump talking point to show power by picking on someone. And so that's her father that's been picked on so broadly. And he didn't do anything wrong. The investigation that even the very anti-Biden senator and corrupted Senator Ron Johnson just produced their expert witness said, yep, there's nothing to suggest that Biden being on the board of a Ukrainian gas company in any way influenced the US policy towards Ukraine, that Joe Biden was part of a group effort around the world to help Ukraine oust a corrupt prosecutor, Viktor Shokin. So Alan's going to reread it and tweet it. Good. Craig says it's a beautiful story. I find nice things for you, don't I? And I share them. That's my job. It is an incredible family, and it must probably light an extra fire under Joe Biden what his family have been subjected to because of Trump's desire to stay in power by lying about people and bullying people and exposing Americans to danger, because he continues to campaign on a platform of coronavirus is not a real problem. That is Trump's campaign platform. It's not a big problem, so I'm a better bet to manage the economy because I'll open everything up, because I don't believe coronavirus is real, and I don't even believe in wearing masks. Mask wearing is the way to open up the economy. If you wear masks, then people can still go shopping without exposing others to risk or exposing themselves to risk. Masks are essentially vaccines, and they're better than vaccines because you can more readily have higher levels of compliance with mask wearing, provided you have strong messaging, strong and consistent messaging. Because people, you'd think there'd be less campaigning against masks because it's less personally intrusive than having a vaccination. But also vaccines, if any of them do pass the safety and efficacy trials, might not be that effective. They might deliver you an immune response that's only valid for a certain period of time and then diminishes. Let's not call it half the country hates Biden. Let's be more reasonable, Alan, and say a subset of the 42% of the electorate which supports Republican politicians. So there's lots of people that aren't in the voting electorate. They don't vote. They're not registered voters. And yeah. It shows you it's a product of the racism that attended, the racist backlash that attended Obama's tenure in office, that not only Obama, but also people who are allies to a black president get some of the vitriol reserved for the black Democratic president, President Barack Hussein Obama. Yeah, not half. Lots of people like Joe Biden, and he's got a lot of Republican supporters as well now. People that may not count themselves, that may have registered as independents now or registered as Democrats. Because yes, the brainwashing is strong with many Republicans who have Fox News as a source of information. But for other people, some of the people, their lived experience with COVID has been a very powerful motivator to reconsider their use of Fox as a source of news and information. Let's find out. That's a good question, Bob. What proportion of the electorate are registered Republicans? Yeah, you were close, Bob. Independents account for 29% of voters compared to 28% for Republicans. There are still way more registered Democrats. 39% of voters are registered with that party. That's extraordinary. You don't hear that much. You don't hear it. Oh, yes, that's such big news that 386 national security leaders, including over 200 generals, former generals, have signed a letter endorsing Joe Biden and repudiating Donald Trump, which is great. I mean, America needs that. I would have loved that to happen before the 2018 midterm. Imagine if people had recognized then that Donald Trump was such a threat to the United States that all stops needed to be pulled out then, and imagine getting control of the Senate. Imagine what could have happened without Mitch McConnell digging graves for 400 pieces of legislation passed by the Democratic House. Well, exactly. The military tend to lean Republican and conservative, but yes. So yes, Republican registration has fallen from being 32%, close to 33% of the electorate in 2004, has fallen down to I think 28.87, and independent registration has risen from 23% to now 29%, so slightly overtaken, very slightly overtaken the numbers of Republicans, and Democrats still the highest at 39.66%, slightly down from 42% in 2004 as well, but still a much higher subset of the electorate than Republicans. But of course, yes, a lot of those independent voters are Republicans who don't or lean Republican. So yes, 28.87% for Republicans, so effectively 29, and then 29.09 for independents. All right, folks. I've enjoyed your company so much that I've talked for 2 hours and haven't gone. I'm very firmly going now. I'll just say my goodbyes. Take care of yourselves and each other. Goodbye, Mark, Alan, Bob, Craig, John, M. Gage. I think that's all. I think that's all of my regular viewers that I can see from the comment section. We both need soup, indeed. It was great to see you. Yes, as always, take care of yourselves and each other. Stay as productive as you can. Let's take a step back from the outrage cycle and just calmly describe the outrages to each other in a way that gives our emotions an outlet without succumbing to our most negative, fearful, terrified emotions. Yes, we can acknowledge to each other. When we can speak our emotions, it reduces their potency. If we can say yes, to a degree, it's terrifying that the incumbent president declines to commit to transferring power, the democratic transfer of power, which has been a mainstay of American elections for a long time. And yes, peace out, everyone. Peace out. Take care of yourselves and each other. Remind your friends to check their registration. Potentially print out some registration forms. Would that help? Can you print out forms and just give them to people? Are you allowed to do that? Or show people the website where you can register online. And I have a Patreon account, but at this point, I'd almost rather you gave to Joe Biden or to Senate races. But thank you so much to the people that do support me and help defray the cost of using this website that allows me to share resources with you and and helps me pay for my Washington Post subscription and things like that. Thank you. Thank you all so much for making the time and effort to not only listen to me, but form supportive communities with each other in the comment section. Thank you, Paul. I do appreciate you all so much. I forgot to say goodbye to you. There you are. Cheers, everybody. Thanks. Bye. Peace. Peace out.